Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our two games is 2021's Guilty Gear Strive, the complete reconstruction of the hard rock Heaven or Hell 2D anime fighting game that attempts to be more appealing to newcomers to the franchise.
Following that is the first entry into Capcom's now defunct fighting game franchise that pits creatures of the night against each other in a battle for supremacy, and introducing one of Capcom's most recognizable crossover participants, 1994's Darkstalkers, The Night Warriors.
Of course it's fighting games. It's EVO week, baby!
Yeah! Now with less harassment. Maybe.
Now with less Super Smash Brothers, that's for sure.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Now that Sony has purchased EVO, and PlayStation 4s will be used for all of the games. And Nintendo decided to bow out that way. So it'll be a bit of a different year, but should be entertaining to see fighting games from August 5th through 7th, ending on Grand Finals Sunday. The games featured will be Street Fighter V Champion Edition, Guilty Gear Strive, Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate, Tekken 7, King of Fighters 15, Melty Blood Type Lumina, Dragon Ball FighterZ, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, and Skullgirls Second Encore.
I'm not sure how much I watched this year. I don't know. I might watch Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball is always fun to watch. Street Fighter V, I like to watch, but I've tired of Street Fighter V.
Yeah, if anything, I think it's more exciting to think about like what possible announcements could come out of EVO. Like they'll do a character reveal for Street Fighter 6. Maybe we'll get some DLC news for Guilty Gear Strive. King of Fighters 15 is always fun. King of Fighters is fun to watch. I feel like when I saw 13 several years back at EVO, that was just a fun time to drop in. You're right, Dragon Ball's always hype. Good to see Skullgirls get a new chance at an audience there.
Yeah, they finally get a chance.
It's awesome.
I will probably try and watch Tekken, but it's never going to get better than that one year where a player from Pakistan just showed up and nobody knew who he was, and then he won the tournament.
Amazing. Who knows what'll happen at EVO? So yeah, definitely tune in if you're a fan of fighting games. And so yeah, as is usually the tradition, we try to talk about fighting games around this time, and some good ones to cover. One of which, Guilty Gear Strive is going to be at EVO, so that should be exciting. Joe, how are you doing? You're back from vacation. What are you playing? What have you been playing?
Well, I finished The House in Fata Morgana. It is fantastic. A lot of reading. It is a lot of reading. Oh my god, it's so much reading. But I heavily recommend it. I'm going to talk about it in October because it is technically a quote-unquote gothic horror game, even though there's not a ton of horror, I think, but it counts. It has a very dark tone to it, at least. I will say, for anybody that is interested in trying it, it does have some very uncomfortable subjects at times, does not pull its punches, and very few people are happy in that game. So, I just be aware of that, but I very much recommend that game to most people.
It's deserving of its super high Metacritic score is what you're saying.
Yes, I think so, very much. Then, I spent the rest of vacation just bulldozing through the rest of Danganronpa V3.
Congratulations.
Rolled credits on the plane ride home.
Love it.
So, it was good. Now I just gotta wait for Matt to finish so that we can go to the beach and
have some Mario Party.
Have some Mario Party, basically. Mario Party with spoilers for 3 story-based games. that being said, yeah, I had a good time. I think it is probably my favorite of the three overall. I don't quite know how I feel about the ending. I do know that I respect the ending because that is a ballsy ending.
It's a choice.
But I think I land more on the I like it side, but I don't know. I still haven't marinated in it long enough, I guess.
I think it is one that does take marinating. I think you're right there. I'm the same way. It's like, yeah, I generally like it, but you're right in the sense that seeing your different commentary on it as you've been playing it, you're right. It does not beat Chapter 1. Like, Chapter 1's the best part of that game, and it doesn't reach those highs again.
Oh yeah, Chapter 1's the best part of the franchise, honestly. Yeah. But other than that, I started playing The House in Fata Morgana Requiem for Innocence.
Oh, there's more?
Oh, yeah. There's a prequel. That's what this is. There's also a sequel that I haven't played yet called Reincarnation. But it gives a lot more detail to a series of events that are very central to the main plot of the original game, where you mainly only hear these events described in the original game, and now you're actually seeing them happen. It's not as long as the original game, at least according to How Long to Beat, neither is Reincarnation. The original game's like 35, 40 hours long, somewhere along there, but these are only like 10 hours long each, as far as I can tell, but so far it is still very good, and I'm hoping to get through that and the sequel relatively quickly, because then it's time for Live Alive, and then it's almost time for Soul Hackers.
Oh boy. Wow. What a time for games. And those that sequel and prequel, they're part of the same package on Switch?
Correct, yes. I believe they are DLC on Steam, but on Switch, if you buy it, everything comes with it.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I might have to put that on a PC wish list. I feel like that may be a game that gets cheap. Maybe that may be the most affordable place to play it. That's interesting. I've been going through a lot of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I have beaten the Wrath of the Druids and the Siege of Paris DLC, which were both of the expansions that came in their season pass or the gold edition or whatever. They weren't necessary. It was a lot of the same, and they're trying to do, just some slight tweaks, like, the Ireland one, the Wrath of the Druids, has another Order of the Ancients kind of tree to eliminate different cult members again. Like, oh, that's neat. But then Siege of Paris is like, oh, we've been watching Hitman do its thing with like different ways to approach assassinations and like make that a bigger part of it. So it's like they tried to highlight different things, but the story-wise, they're not essential. It's okay. It's fine. This Dawn of Ragnarok expansion, though, that came out earlier this year, though, where it's kind of dipping into more of the Norse mythology that the main base game already does. Neat so far. Enough new things that it's like, oh, it feels worthy of a paid expansion beyond the season pass. So really different new abilities and a whole new dimension kind of added to the core gameplay loop with this Hooger meter that charges up different special abilities to use. So it is nice and fresh and new. I don't know how much it's going to add to the main Assassin's Creed story, if it'll change anything before we learn in September about new installments to the franchise. But yeah, having fun with it. In the meantime, though, let's talk about, it's been a couple weeks since we've recorded, actually, to give a little inside baseball. So there's been some news stories that pop up in the video game industry. Let's talk about how some composers that we've talked about on the show before, how they work into that, how some games we've talked about are still kind of living on. And as we are at the turn of a month here, let's talk about some new free games that are available through subscriptions as the new PlayStation Plus rolls along, starting off with their essential games, which are essentially the base PS Plus subscription that you may have had before. That's what carries over as the kind of baseline essential model. For August 2022, Little Nightmares is in there as a free game. along with Yakuza Like a Dragon and the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 remakes. So that's a really good month for that free game, Little Nightmares, we've talked about before on the show. This kind of got paired with the news that the Yakuza games, at least all of the mainline ones, are coming to PlayStation Plus in some form by the end of the year. Unfortunately, because how PlayStation Plus is now structured, they're spread out over their different tiers. So it's like 0, Kiwami and Kiwami 2 are part of the next step up from Essential, and then like the 3, 4, 5, and maybe 6 is part of that middle one as well. But like the 3, 4, 5 remakes are part of that top premium one. So it's like, that's how you do it. Meanwhile, I think they're all on Game Pass. So
yeah, they're all on Game Pass, and that's probably the better place to go if you really, really want to play the Yakuza games. The PS Plus stuff is still seems like a mess. First of all, 3, 4, and 5 are on the higher tier.
Yeah,
those are
weird.
PS3 games.
Well, they're the remakes, so but yeah, based on the PS3 games, right?
Meanwhile, you know what game keeps showing up on stuff being added to these subscription things? Calico, and it's joining Xbox Games with Gold for August 2022, alongside, by the way, a game we haven't talked about, but a composer we have, being Monaco, What's Yours Is Mine, its soundtrack being by Austin Wintory. I do not know why Calico in particular keeps appearing on these, services. I mean, good for it. I'm sure they're getting some money for that, but it's an odd choice.
And it's kind of weird, of course, Calico we talked about just a few weeks ago alongside Detroit Become Human, which still a weird pairing. I don't know how popular that episode was. But I feel like Calico is a good budget choice for some of these compilations. Like, at least PlayStation Plus still has like a good slate of quote-unquote free games at the baseline. Games with Gold just get sadder and sadder, I think. Although Monaco's a nice inclusion. I like some old Ragtime Piano by Austin Wintory. It's a great soundtrack and a fun little co-op game there. But yeah, you're reaching for some budget picks. Speaking of services that are struggling for their free game offerings, let's talk about Stadia Pro for their August 22. There's a report that Google's about to, kill off Stadia a couple months away. We're just waiting at this point. Stadia Pro for August 2022 also includes Calico, but it also includes among its games Murder by Numbers and Shantae Half Genie Hero. Again, games we've covered on the show before, but it's neat to see that pop up. I finally got rid of my Stadia subscription a year ago when I was trying to do all this house saving work. Best decision. Never look back.
Meanwhile, Ivy Tran of Ivy and Sarashu, who we talked about long ago, I want to say at the beginning of last year for their work on Ekenfell, they have actually released their first solo album. It is called Tiger and Water. It is being released through their new label, Inflorescence Music, which has hosted music by not only Ivy, but also Lena Raine comes to mind as one of them. I want to say Slide 20XX, but I'm not 100% on that. But Lena Raine I know for sure. And that releases on August 4th, so definitely give that a listen when it drops.
Before that, though, tomorrow, as of time of episode release, is a Pokemon Presents at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, with some news I'm sure to be released about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet coming out just over 3 months from now, especially as the talk heightens up around the internet about leaks here, leaks there, leaks everywhere. Pokemon's probably let's finally talk about this game some more. Should be interesting to see what happens. I'm sure they'll give updates on other apps like Go and Unite and Cafe Remix. I don't know. Also got reminded that it's been almost 3 years since the Detective Pikachu Switch port was announced.
Oh, right. That was announced, wasn't it?
Where is that? I think they've also had talk about how they're working on a sequel to that game. And I feel like at this point, it's like, oh, they're just waiting for a sequel to come out and they're just going to bundle the two together on Switch. Also weird if you ever watched that movie where the first Detective Pikachu game on 3DS, like, only got to like the halfway point of the movie. And so the movie kind of concluded that story. And so now the game is like, well, do we follow what the movie did or do we do something different? So I don't know. Things to see what'll happen at Pokemon Presents when we've talked about plenty of Pokemon games, plenty of Pokemon composers. Should be neat to hear.
All right. I think it's time to do some VGM Hurdle.
It lives!
It's getting to be about that time. It's not broken this time. Woo!
Yeah, we thought it was dead last time and that we killed it. But no, apparently it lives. And so we're going to try to guess a video game music track, starting with 1 second, going all the way up into increments up to 16 seconds over at vgm-hurdle.glitch.me. It's been some interesting ones this past week. There was the Final Fantasy Prelude when it came back from the dead, I think.
Fitting, oddly enough.
And then there was the Brinstar theme from the original Metroid a couple days ago as well.
Mm-hmm. And they also had a song from Call of Duty where the first second was nothing, and the next 2 seconds were 1 second of nothing, followed by a single drum hit. So, thanks for that.
We'll hope for a better track inclusion here. Joe, are you ready to listen to this for a second here?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Yeah, it's Sonic. It's from Hill? No, it's not Hilltop. It's one of those early ones. And then like fires going across. It's Aquatic Ruin.
Yeah.
Aquatic Ruin from Sonic 2.
I knew it was specifically Sonic 2, but I
was trying to make sure that like it wasn't Sonic 3. It's like, no, it wasn't like Marble Garden. It wasn't anything like that. What's the second stage in the original Sonic the Hedgehog? No, Aquatic Ruin.
Well, hey, we got it.
a weird pick, but hey, I'm good with getting back in that flow for sure.
We're back, baby. We did it. 1 second. The streak will never die this time.
Never, ever, until it's silence again. All right, let's talk about some fighting games this week on the show, and I'll start with a more recent fighting game, an award winner for fighting games last year, and that would be Guilty Gear Strive. Guilty Gear. We have not talked about Guilty Gear on the show yet, either the series or its composer, so finally time to bring this here. I wanted to, probably if you think of Guilty Gear, I think most people think of like Guilty Gear X, and like that's probably a good one to bring eventually, but you know, especially after this game was included in our best of 2021 collection, I was like, you know what, let's just bring Strive to the show, and it should be an interesting one to talk about because Guilty Gear Strive is the 6th mainline installment in the franchise, and even that's questionable. I think it depends on what people define as mainline. I'll explain shortly. Apparently, overall, it is the 25th release in the Guilty Gear series, though, once you talk about revisions being released to the main installments, and then also all of the spin-offs. So it's a pretty big series overall, but Guilty Gear Strive is intended to be a beginner-friendly, complete reconstruction of the franchise. So it follows the original Guilty Gear from 1998. Then you have 2000's Guilty Gear X, 2002's Guilty Gear XX, or at least in the States and in the West, we call it X2 because we can't have anything called XX. 2007's Guilty Gear 2 Overture. There's 2014's Guilty Gear Xrd Sign. And this is where it gets a little bit debatable about what is a mainline Guilty Gear game, because some people consider 2015's Guilty Gear Xrd Revelator to be a new mainline installment, but then some people think it's just an expansion because there's also Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2 that released in 2017. So what is Guilty Gear Strive then? It got released worldwide for PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, and PC on June 11th, 2021. It arrived later in arcades in Japan on July 29th, 2021. It is developed by Arc System Works, who publishes the game in Japan and North America. Bandai Namco Entertainment takes care of the publishing in the PAL regions, and Sega publishes the arcade version. While Arc System Works, you may have heard that name mentioned before on the show, they are most well known for making Guilty Gear and its spiritual successor, BlazBlue. They've also created licensed hits for fighting games in recent years, which include Dragon Ball FighterZ and Persona 4 Arena. So, Guilty Gear Strive is a 2D fighting game that is well known for its detailed anime-style graphics, colorful characters, technical gameplay, and the numerous references to hard rock and heavy metal music that serve as inspiration for its characters and soundtracks. This is the franchise that starts its battles with Heaven or Hell, Let's Rock. So, I mean, what better inspiration do you need with Let's Rock starting a battle? Guilty Gear Strive apparently retains the core essence of the series, but revamps many features and mechanics. Except it removes the series' signature mechanic, the instant kill. A long, winding charge-up move that if it lands, it is a one-hit KO, basically. Though the game does introduce the wall break feature, which allows for stage transitions when a combo is initiated in the corner of the arena. I do not know much about Guilty Gear, in case you couldn't already be established there. So when I look up the plot to this game, oh boy, that is a series that is all over the place with its story. It's bonkers. It's crazy to the point where I think the game even comes with like a flow chart in the game for each game that shows character relations and tries to explain things that way.
There's also at the lead up to Strive, they hired Wooly Versus Willie Madden to do an entire video series on the lore of Guilty Gear.
Oh, that's neat and really smart. I like that. Because there's also on their main website, there's like a digest comics series. So, I mean, whichever way that, works best for you, there is a way to catch up for beginners. Because, yeah, you want a beginner's entry into Guilty Gear, and then you throw all of this story at them, which apparently on their website, they try to keep it as simple as possible with this summary here. Quote, after defeating the threat known as the Universal Will, Saul Bad Guy enjoyed a brief moment of peace until he heard the shocking news. Asuka R. Kreutz, known as That Man, who left his mark as the worst criminal in all of history by creating gears and initiating the Crusades, surrendered to the U.S. government. The man who turned him into a gear. While Saul now sought revenge on him, he was once a close friend. Trying to guess Asuka's true intentions, Saul stands up with his weapon in hand. The time has come at last to settle his fate with Asuka R. Kreutz. It seems like, at least for Saul Bad Guy's story, I guess, what will happen in the encounter between Saul and Asuka? And how do Asuka's three lieutenants, Raven, Ino, and Jacko Valentine, how do they plan to get involved? And that's just one character of all the characters and how it all ties together. Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Guilty Gear Strive?
I have never touched a Guilty Gear game, ever. They're intimidating to me. I've been told that I shouldn't let that worry me and that they're really cool even if you don't fully know what you're doing. And I believe people that tell me that, but I'm afraid and a coward. So I have never touched a Guilty Gear game, not because I just don't want to, but because I just, it's not really something I'm going to go out of my way to experience, and I haven't really had a chance to do it on my own. If I'm going to do any of them, I guess Strive is probably the place to jump in, but even then, I don't know. I've never even watched, competitive Guilty Gear, which surprises me, and I probably should, because all I've ever heard is that it's kind of insane. So maybe I'll tune into that at EVO this year. Who knows?
I'm right there with you. Like, I hardly know anything. I haven't played any Guilty Gear. I don't even think I've watched any, to be honest. So it does make it for the perfect time for EVO coming up, where Guilty Gear Strive will be one of the featured games. Might have to check some out. So to learn about it was interesting because it definitely caught an ear, and Guilty Gear soundtracks, legendary with their quality. Like, I mean, you get Ishiwatari and his guitar skills, and it's going to be a good time. So it was definitely, I think, a worthy inclusion in our best of 2021 list last year. But as far as the game and what it's all about, and I didn't even know it was like a beginning point, like meant for like, let's get beginners involved in Guilty Gear. Like, I did not know that at all. So that was kind of neat to find out. The characters for Guilty Gear Strive, I think there are like 15 or so in the base roster. There's Soul Bad Guy, Kai Kisk, May, Axel Lowe, Chip Zanoff, Potemkin, Faust, Milia Rage, Zato 1, Giovanna, who's apparently a newcomer. There's Ram Lethal Valentine, Leo Whitefang, Nagoriyuki, who is also a newcomer, Anji Mito, and Ino. They have a season pass that has already completed that added the new characters of Gold Lewis Dickinson, Jacko Valentine, Happy Chaos, Baiken, and Testament. According to director Akira Katano, the team aimed to appeal to more players by making the gameplay of Strive easier to comprehend compared to previous Guilty Gear games, instead of just making it easier. He reasoned that with many fighting games, spectators and casual players would have a hard time understanding higher level play and lose interest in watching or improving. And I think that's fair. Hope to get some new eyes on the game this weekend, because it's big to talk about Guilty Gear at EVO. See, a new installment in the Guilty Gear series was confirmed to be in development at EVO 2018 by Arc System Works. And then the game had its worldwide reveal and its announcement trailer under the working title New Guilty Gear, and it showed its new Unreal Engine 4 graphics and its wall break mechanic, and that was at EVO 2019. The Strive name would be added to Guilty Gear in a November 2019 trailer. And it meant to be released in October 2020, but then, that whole pandemic happened. They pushed it to like early 2021. They had like a beta test, and then they made some really good changes based on that, but they're like, we got to push it back some more. So as a result, June 2021. The game was reviewed well when it released, though, with a Metacritic average of 87 on PS5 and 84 on PS4 and PC. Mitchell Saltzman over at IGN noted that it, quote, raises the bar for anime-like fighters in terms of its visuals, online netcode, and sheer creativity found in all aspects of its design. But some reviewers noted things like a nearly impenetrable story, as well as some trimmed features like a combo challenge mode, character-specific cutscenes in arcade mode, and a limited online lobby. These were all seen as detriments, at least at launch. No idea if they've fixed it since then. But the game was pretty successful. The only sales figures I could find were that the game has sold 500,000 copies in its first month. That's not too bad for a kind of niche fighting game in what is overall a niche genre that is fighting games. So 500,000 copies in a month, that's pretty good. It won Best Fighting Game at the Game Awards and also Fighting Game of the Year at the DICE Awards. Not really any other notable nominations, but certainly I would say, the best fighting game from 2021. As far as its legacy goes, we've been saying it, but check it out at EVO this weekend, if that interests you at all. A second season pass is supposedly in the works with a crossplay update coming at the first character release of that, so I'd say that sounds like some potential for a new announcement there at just before Grand Finals, just after Grand Finals, wherever they want to place it. Let's talk about the composer for Guilty Gear Strive, and he's more than just the composer for Guilty Gear. Let's talk about Daisuke Ishiwatari. Daisuke Ishiwatari was born on August 14th, 1973, in Johannesburg, South Africa. He conceived the original Guilty Gear before joining Arc System Works when he was still in a vocational school. But when he joined Arc System Works in 1995, he revealed to the president he wanted to make a game in a 2D fighter in the likeness almost of a Street Fighter, in a way. And this resulted in the first Guilty Gear, which eventually released in 1998. Ishiwatari is the one behind creating the characters, the storyline, and he also composes the music. Not only that, he was the voice actor for the series protagonist, Saul Bad Guy, until 2007. Ishiwatari is noted specifically for composing in the metal and rock genres, and that makes sense based on where the inspirations are derived for Guilty Gear. And his compositions feature intricate guitar work, and as of late, vocals provided by Naoki Hashimoto from the band Outrage. He is apparently currently the chief creative officer over at Arc System Works. His favorite band is Queen. And in the library mode, which I think is like a Guilty Gear compendium that was first introduced in Xrd Sign, Ishiwatari is said to be the, quote, king of tea. According to the legends, by giving him some tea leaves and a teapot, one will taste the best tea of their lives. But this same source also said, unfortunately, Ishiwatari seems to be a coffee person and takes it black. So who knows? The man is all over Arc System Works soundtracks, though primarily for their main franchises, of course, being Guilty Gear, with the original Guilty Gear X, XX, Guilty Gear 2 Overture, Xrd Sign, and Strive. Also, he composes for BlazBlue, the other big ArcSys game, being all their main big installments. So Calamity Trigger, Continuum Shift, Chrono Phantasma, and Central Fiction. It only just now occurred to me that all of those start with C. Good job, BlazBlue. He's also composed for Hardcore Uprising and Chunithum Crystal. No idea what that is. But
sounds like a real chuny game.
Well, apparently it's a pretty recent game from like 2019. So who knows, honestly. The big thing about this game is that it's the first time in the series that every playable character has a vocal theme. And I feel like it helped it stand out a lot when we were looking through our games last year for Best of 2021. So let's get to those 5 critical tracks. It's the same critical 5 we included. We're just going to go and dive in a little bit deeper in each of these. And then we have a couple of tracks on the cutting room floor as we do. So let's get into the critical tracks for Guilty Gear Strive. Let's start with the first one. This is Smell of the Game.
That is bullshit blazing, still my heart is blazing. If the words kill me, I don't need a new one. How dare you? Soon you will know. We already know the smell of the game.
This is the main theme of Guilty Gear Strive, or it's like the main OP theme, the opening theme to the game. In fact, it was done so well in advance that I believe it was part of the trailer that was shown off with the game at EVO 2019. Even a couple days after that trailer was put out, it was like attached to the Steam page for Rev 2, I think, for Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2 as like possible DLC. Like you can buy this single, Smell of the Game, for the next Guilty Gear game. Like that's how early it's been associated with this game. Vocals by Naoki, as referred to earlier in the research, with Naoki Hashimoto from the band Outrage. Of course, all the music composed by Daisuke Ishiwatari. And it's really interesting to hear this kind of style of music. I don't necessarily know if we've had a similar comp point to a previous episode of Original Soundchat where like it makes me think of hard rock metal bands like Killswitch Engage or Bullet for My Valentine to think of music like that. But here we go, Smell of the Game with, do you mind the PG lyrics of going into the chorus, but that is bullshit. Blazing. Still my heart is blazing. If the words kill me, I don't need a new world order. You soon will know. We already know the smell of the game.
What does any of that mean?
Japanese lyrics being English, I don't know.
I do remember this being very, very early because I remember that Bullshit Blazing became a meme for a little while.
For sure, yep.
This song is awesome. It is probably an easy favorite of the soundtrack for me, at least of the soundtrack that I have heard. And I don't know what the smell of the game means, but apparently we already know it.
Maybe it's the sweating that comes from the encounters of fighting. But maybe that's bullshit. Blazing. All right. Number 2 on the Critical 5, we get to some of the character themes, and who better to start with than Soul Bad Guy's theme. This is Find Your One Way.
The world is not so tight right. Strike back, get them out of your way. You don't care if along the way's a little sacrifice. Strike back, get them out of your way. Don't melt in the world, find your one way.
So we're not going into full Ishiwatari guitar craziness just yet, but getting a good groove here for Saul Bad Guy's theme. And what you give the protagonist of the series for his theme, because he's an aloof and brash bounty hunter of immense skill on a quest to find and eliminate all gears and their creator, Ano Otoko, or that man. So, yeah, it's a neat piece, and again, like very different from a lot of the tracks that we've heard before on this show, but you're getting Japanese hard metal, and I like it, but it's very Guilty Gear. And of course, then we're getting, the vocals it's pretty new to the series as well. But yeah, a neat guitar groove here. We're not going full crazy, but just a nice. You're hearing the solo guitar lick at the end. Nice stuff there. Again, we're going to get into like some more wild solos or even more intense pieces, but this is a good one for a main protagonist.
I think this song is pretty good, but like you can hear in the clip, the chorus is unbelievably catchy.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way that it flows. And that's really the only part I can think of when I'm not actually listening to the song. Not to say that the song is bad, it's just that chorus is just really, really good. And I don't know, I think I have other songs that I like a bit more, but yeah, it's good.
I think the important thing to note, though, is that Guilty Gear gets like different character themes seemingly each main installment. And that's just like Ishiwatari having like probably new ideas and just kind of flexing his creative muscles. But then you don't get classic iconic themes. Like we know Ryu's theme from Street Fighter, and it gets iterated on and, enhanced and changed and tweaked, but it's still Ryu's theme to the core. And I feel like Guilty Gear, at least from my brush with the franchise here, doesn't necessarily have that. Great music, but not like an iconic theme carried out from its lineage that moves on beyond. At least that didn't come across to me.
That's interesting because like fighting games tends to be the bread and butter of fighting game soundtracks overall. But yeah, who knows?
You'd think so, right? And maybe I'm full of it and I don't know what I'm talking about, but I look at, his like wiki page on Guilty Gear's fandom, and it's like he's got all these tracks, they have like all these different titles. I probably should have listened to some more, but this didn't seem like anything that was carrying on a classic catchy melody from years past. Let's put it that way. Let's go on to number 3 on the Critical 5 here for Guilty Gear Strive, and this is The Roar of the Spark.
Under the same vampires, never stop, just go. I don't care how many more stars again. Here in the pale fire, I'm going out for eyes again. I hold my pal
There you go. You start to hear at the end of the clip some of the solo guitar work from Ishiwatari. The Roar of the Spark is the theme of Kai Kisk, and he is the deuter antagonist of the series because he's Soul Bad Guy's rival. He is a former member of the Sacred Order of Holy Knights during the Crusades. Kai is a charismatic swordsman who possesses a strong sense of justice and piety, which sustain and guide him through all manner of shaking uncertainties. Looking at his name being spelled Kykiske, I'm like, how the heck do you pronounce that? Apparently in Japanese, it's Kai, Kai, and then Kisku. And then he's like French also, so it's apparently Kai Kisk. So neat to hear this one. Again, it's like kind of a similar vibe, maybe just a little darker, a little deeper than Soul Bad Guys, but you get the Roar of the Spark at the end is a neat one to come in through. I feel like this one doesn't stand out as much musically, but a good one to include, at least, with a first brush with the soundtrack. It's a track that stands out, and all the better that he's Soul's rival. So let's get Kai's track in there.
This is a title I hear brought up a lot when people are talking about the soundtrack. I'd put this at like number 3 of the Critical 5 for me, and it's not even like a close number 3. Like, it's good, it's really good, but there's way better stuff on this soundtrack. That being said, I mean, Naoki's killing it on this.
Oh, for sure.
On this one specifically.
It's like a kind of track that, like, I would listen to this anytime. And even if it's like middling on the soundtrack, it's still so good, right? The quality is undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
We continue on to number 4 on the Critical 5, and this one here is Play the Hero.
No matter what life though that you take it on. Well, fight like a tiger, walk in the park. Play the hero till I die. Fly like an eagle, soar through the sky. Be free until you die.
So undeniably catchy. Like, I don't know who this is for as far as this character when I'm listening through the soundtrack, but wow, I fight like a tiger and till I die. Like, you can't deny that energy, that bass lick at the end of the chorus, and then go right into that guitar riff too. Just so cool. So it turns out then in research that this is the character theme for Chip Zanoff, who is a former drug trafficker and addict who struggled in the streets of his hometown until he became the Hokage, and he was trained in his arts of ninjutsu by his master, and then the master was murdered by a syndicate and all this stuff. Basically, the YouTube comments are like, he's a druggie who turned into the Hokage. Like, that's who this guy is, and so the positive energy is just infectious and so good.
Look, I'm sorry, Chip Zanoff is not the name of a fighting game character. It's somebody I have to cross-examine in an Ace Attorney game. I can't,
yeah.
I can't not see that. And to find out that he's a drug trafficker that turned into a ninja. Guilty Gear sounds stupid, but in the best possible way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I admit this song is pretty catchy, but it's still not my number 2, but it is. The lyrics are both dumb and also cool at the same time, which is a very hard balance to keep.
But it does it just so. I totally agree. It kind of just walks that line there. I'm going to guess this is both of our favorite track here, though, to wrap up the Critical 5. It's another character theme, but it's a totally different vibe. Number 5 here is Love the Subhuman Self.
Until I fall in place, stay with me until the end of time. So carry on, love the subhuman self. Time goes on, lasting
This is the character theme for Milia Rage. And she is a former member of the Assassin's Guild who wields her cursed hair as a weapon, as she is able to give it any shape and form that she desires. Not only is this different from some of the instrument choices, I mean that piano bit into the heavy drop in the chorus, amazing, but different vocals as you hear, and this is vocals by Aisha and Jameson Boaz. And so definitely a different vibe from what we've been getting with Naoki. Wow, this one is so cool, dark and heavy, and just love the different, not only instrumental vibe, but the different vocalist really lifts it up too. I don't think Milia Rage is any, sort of special character just for this game or anything like that, but I love how this one sounds. And I think you do too.
Absolutely. This is so close a second to Smell of the Game that depending on the day, it is the first. This is absolutely fantastic. I love the whole tone of the whole thing. The vocals are absolutely crushing it. And I don't know what subhuman self means, but boy howdy, they're right. We should love it.
We all need some self-care every now and then. For a couple tracks on the cutting room floor, went with a couple seemingly fan favorites as far as what I could gather. One of these was definitely a fan favorite, and this one is The Disaster of Passion. I don't know why I get River City Girls vibes, which is kind of weird considering Arc System Works published that game, at least over here. But yeah, a totally different peppy vibe, and this is the character theme for May, who she's the young-looking and spunky first mate of the Jellyfish Pirates. I think she has like dolphins as a part of her attack, like short brown hair, orange kind of cap on top of that.
Oh, yeah.
Vocals are by Aisha once again. And just, you hear the difference between the last track for Love the Subhuman Self and this one. Totally night and day, but it just has that energy that gets you up and going and ready to take on whatever.
This song is great. The only thing I know about May is that I'm pretty sure, just based on from the outside looking in, she might be the most hated character in fighting games. At least for a while she was, because everything I heard was, oh my god, I hate that goddamn dolphin. That dolphin is the worst. Ban May, please. I don't know what any of that means, but it makes me happy. That a dolphin is the source of such strife. Yeah, this song is great. See, I don't hear River City Girls. I hear Sonic almost.
Sure.
Some of the instrumentation gives me a real Sonic vibe.
Yeah, I don't know. It just has a different feeling to it, and it's nice to hear some of the range and diversity on this soundtrack. But as we get back to some more dark Naoki tracks here, again, all still composed by Ishiwatari, wrapping up the cutting room floor here for me is What Do You Fight For?
So let's get to the bottom line. If the what do you fight for? You deny your thirst. Now it's time to feast. Bring it out, keep grinding. Diving deep like cold steel. I won't face my doom. Sayonara.
I was really torn of what to add for this last cutting room floor track. So at the very least, I figured why not have it be Nagoriyuki's track, his theme. And he's a noble vampire samurai who wields a blood-sucking blade. So add one of the newcomers to the game. Again, vocals by Naoki on this one. It's, just a neat character design overall, and a track that also sounds pretty cool. But I think I'd pick this one more because just a neat character, a new character to the game, and just kind of rounding it out there. On the wiki page, on the fandom page, this one had the trivia bit of the first verse of the song is sung in a similar fashion to the song Come Together by the Beatles, more exactly influenced by Michael Jackson's version of the song. Didn't know that when I was selecting the clips, but there you go. There's also that if you're interested.
Huh. Wasn't he one of the first, like, he was the first character they showed?
I think because he's like the boss character in this game, so that would make sense.
Yeah, like, I remember, before it was even called Strive, I'm pretty sure, like, at EVO, they just showed him. I'm pretty sure I'm thinking of the right character.
Sounds about right.
But yeah, this is a very heavy, edgy song, which if it's a vampire, okay. And that is the weirdest fitting segue to end Critical 5.
I think so, because we're about to talk about some more Creatures of the Night soon. But before we do, what will I never forget about Guilty Gear Strive? I mean, I got a lot to learn, clearly. Maybe an Evo watch this weekend is certainly due. But, you know, seeing some of these memes that pop up from this game with bullshit blazing and things like that, it's nice to learn more about it. And I'm glad that was, you know, fitting to do, especially after we added it in Best of 2021. I still think, you know, stand by that. It's definitely part of the top 10 there. But, you know, also we sometimes, you know, have a bit more to learn about the games that we include on that list. And I feel like in the year to come following that, it's a good time to do that.
Yeah, it's a really, really good soundtrack. And I do also agree that 100% it earned its spot on that top 10 list. Even though it says something when I'm pretty sure that's the only game on the list that neither of us had played.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a real indication of this soundtrack's overall quality in general.
Before we transition to our next game, let's highlight a fan cover, a fan remix, whether it's on YouTube, OC Remix, whatever. I feel like OC Remix has like a lot of covers of old Guilty Gear tracks, but as far as ones from Guilty Gear Strive, I found one from The Consoles, and that's a good jazz cover band that we brought up before on the show as far as a transition artist. The Consoles did a Motown cover, they say, of May's theme, The Disaster of Passion, and it's just infectious and delightful, and I really enjoy it. I hope you do too. We will be right back.
Alright kids, we just finished talking about a game that came out last year. Now let's go 27 years even further back. Wow. To talk about Darkstalkers, The Night Warriors, or as it is known in Japan, Vampire, The Night Warriors.
A cool title for Japan to be sure, though I feel like Darkstalkers is a more appropriate fighting game title.
Oh, don't you worry. We will get into the naming scheme of this franchise later.
Oh, I can't wait.
It's a mess. Anyways, so Darkstalkers The Night Warriors originally released in Japanese arcades on July 12th, 1994, and then would release outside of Japan later that month. A PlayStation port would release in March of 1996, though November 1996 in Europe, and PlayStation 2 on May 19th, 2005, as part of the Vampire Darkstalkers collection. The PS1 version was re-released digitally on PlayStation Network on November 19th, 2011, for both PS3 and PSP. The easiest way to play it nowadays, though, is as a part of the Capcom Fighting Collection, which is now out on PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Not only does it have, I believe, the entire Darkstalkers series, but it also has a bunch of other Capcom fighting games that you've probably never heard of.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like it is a neat package. So the arcade original was, of course, developed and published by Capcom, but the PS1 port was developed by Psygnosis and published by Capcom everywhere but in Europe, where it was published by Virgin Interactive Entertainment. It is a traditional style arcade fighting game where the player takes control of characters based on various creatures of the night. It plays a lot like you're likely used to a Capcom fighter playing. They actually built it on top of systems that they'd already developed for Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. That means that it comes with, combos, a special meter, the speed of a hyper fighter. But it is also one of the first Capcom fighters to use something close to the EX system that now a lot of modern Capcom fighting games have, which is a system that allowed players to use stronger versions of their specials, and this would then make its way into Street Fighter 3, where it would then become a standard part of a lot of fighting games. Darkstalkers also introduced the functions of air blocking, crouch walking, just call it crawling, and chain combos. I don't know what chain combos are, but I do know that what air blocking is, and the fact that that was not in fighting games before this is nuts to me. A difference, though, in how specials work in Darkstalkers as opposed to Street Fighter, which I find very, very interesting, is the fact that in Street Fighter, you build up your special meter, and then once it's built, and you can use it at the most opportune moment. But in Darkstalkers, that is not the case. Your special meter is constantly depleting as you go, so the longer you go without using your special, the less chance you have to use your special, so you gotta use it when you got it.
Interesting.
The playable cast is made up of Anakaris, a mummy who was once an Egyptian pharaoh, Bishamon, a samurai in demonic armor, Dmitry Maximov, a Romanian vampire, Felicia, a happy and optimistic catwoman, John Talbane, an English werewolf. He's known as Gallon in Japan, Gallon. Lord Raptor, a rock star who has been revived as a zombie. He's known as Zabel Zarok in Japan, which is a great name. Morrigan Einsland, who, if you know any character from Darkstalkers, you know Morrigan. She is a succubus and the character who would become the face of the series. Rikuo, a Brazilian merman. He's known as Albath in Japan. Sasquatch. He's a Sasquatch and he hails from Canada.
Yep.
Victor von Gerdenheim, who is a patchwork monster based on Frankenstein's monster. But there are also two boss characters who were not initially playable, but were made playable in the Darkstalkers collection, being Huitzil, an alien robot, and Pyron, an alien and the main antagonist of the game's story. So what is that story? Well, according to Wikipedia, and this is two different wikis, by the way. Half of this is regular Wikipedia, and the other half is the Darkstalkers wiki, both of which had different descriptions for the plot of this game. So this is both of them. The vampire lord, Dmitry Maximov, sets up a tournament to see who is the strongest of the Darkstalkers, and who shall truly be the ruler of the night. That was the Darkstalkers wiki description. Wikipedia says, the powerful alien demon Pyron invades Earth to add to his collection of planets that he has devoured. The world's most fearsome monsters are the last line of defense for mankind. So, both of those, I guess? Choose your own adventure, This is now a choose your own adventure episode, and this is the only choice you have. So, with that being said, what are our experiences with Darkstalkers? Probably in general, because I can't imagine we're going to talk about any other Darkstalkers game at any point.
I would agree with that. I am only familiar with the franchise only to the extent that, yes, Morrigan and Felicia, and I think in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Anakaris was at least in that game as well.
Yes.
But Morrigan and Felicia certainly being main playable characters in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. That was a big fighting game in following the pre-hype cycle for me and all that. So yeah, like, oh yeah, what's this Darkstalkers game? Not like it's a game I've ever gotten to, but yeah, people should know who Morrigan is, especially if you are a fighting game fan. You've been around games for a while. You're familiar with that. Felicia, I don't know. Not necessarily so much, but yeah, Morrigan is everywhere.
For Morrigan, also, even if you're not a fighting game fan, like if you've looked at any fan art ever in terms of video games, you've seen Morrigan.
She has assets.
And people very much like to draw said assets. But also, I think it's just generally something that they focused on in Darkstalkers. I think I tried to play Darkstalkers once, and I hit it like most fighting games, where it's like, this seems cool. I'm gonna stop touching it now. Because I'm not good at it. It's neat. It has this really weird spot where it is an incredibly niche franchise that is dead, by the way. We are never getting another Darkstalkers game, ever. Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
At the same time, like, it features a few of the most iconic fighting game characters of all time. And that's bizarre that it's allowed to have both of those things. But what can you do? I think that it has, like, really good character designs. I do think a new Darkstalkers would be really cool. But again, I don't think we're ever gonna see one. But how did this one, the first one, come into being? Well, I'm glad you asked. See, Street Fighter 2 was really successful. Like, it made a lot of money. Like, a ton of money. As did all of the many, many versions of Street Fighter 2 that then came out after Street Fighter 2. So at that point, Capcom decided that they should use the engine and the mechanics they already had and make a new fighter to further capitalize on the trend that they had created. Because remember, when Street Fighter 2 came out and was super successful, no end to the copycats. No end to them. So, the idea of a fighting game starring monsters was proposed by a colleague of the game's art director, Akira Yasuda, and the first draft of the idea initially focused on various yokai, which are Japanese spirits and monsters and demons and such. But once they started broadening the scope to monsters from outside of Japan, the concept turned into wanting to do a fighting game starring the iconic monsters of Universal Studios, which would be Dracula, the Mummy, the Wolfman, etc. And then they failed to acquire the rights from Universal.
Oops.
And therefore, a cast of original characters had to be designed. This task apparently fell to producer Alex Jimenez, who claims that the cast concepts were figured out in an hour. That's nuts. But also, I guess when you already have, oh, this was going to be Dracula. Now his name is Dmitry Maximoff.
Right,
and he's definitely not Dracula. I guess, that would probably make it a little bit easier. One of the most important ideas behind creating the characters in Darkstalkers, though, was that Yasuda felt that fighting game characters at that time were kind of mainly focused on either cultural stereotypes or just normal sort of fighting designs. And as a result, like, a lot of characters looked the same. There is no end to the Ryus of the old fighting game universe. There are so many Ryus that the Ryu became an archetype in old fighting games.
Oh, yeah.
So there was, I think there was a point being made there. So in his mind, that made people really uninterested in looking into the backstories of those characters. Like, who cares what gi-wearing headband man number 375, who cares where he's from, what he's done? I don't care. Just punch the guy. And Darkstalkers was an attempt to sort of get around that and create some visually distinct character designs that you wouldn't see in any other fighting game. Though they also decided to include more in-depth lore for each character than was typical at the time, And that actually came from the overseas portion of the team, apparently. That was their idea, which is neat to know. Another difference between Darkstalkers and the other fighting games at the time is that, see, in old fighting games, there was arcade mode. I mean, there still is in other fighting games, but, like, it's de-emphasized. And when you beat a character's arcade mode, you got their ending. And usually, these endings were happy, it's the character getting what they want, it's, you know, I can go back to being a young single girl. In Darkstalkers, many of those endings are straight up depressing. Or dark. Because they didn't really feel like the game's themes of starring demons and creatures of the night if every ending was a happy one. So some of them aren't. That's just how it goes, and I think that was probably the smart decision. Another fun fact, though, Psygnosis was chosen to develop the PS1 port because Capcom actually did not have any experience with the PS1 hardware yet, and it had been meant to release in 1995, which was 1 year after the arcade release, but because of various development issues, it released after the sequel had already released on the Sega Saturn. So it was a little late there. There was also apparently a version planned for the 32X, but that never actually materialized. Now, Darkstalkers was incredibly financially successful in arcades. It sold 24,000 cabinets. And the PS1 version didn't review quite as well as the arcade version would have, but overall critics agreed that Darkstalkers, while it was not quite as deep as Street Fighter II, it was still an incredibly fun fighting game. It had a unique and visually distinct cast. That is still the case. I don't think there is any fighting game that looks like Darkstalkers even now. And this was something that, as they expected, set it apart from other fighting games. That was the intention, and they succeeded. Now there are 4 Darkstalkers games after this, and I told you we were going to get into the naming scheme of this series. Here we go. The sequel is called Night Warriors: Darkstalkers Revenge, released in 1995.
As if that name couldn't be more difficult to say. It's Darkstalkers Ziz.
Yeah, it's really stupid. And then, in 1997, they released 3 Darkstalkers games.
What?
Vampire Savior: World of Darkness, released worldwide in 1997. But then Japan also saw the release of Vampire Hunter 2: Darkstalkers Revenge, which is a different game from Night Warriors: Darkstalkers Revenge, and Vampire Savior 2: The Lord of Vampire, both also released in 1997. This is like they looked into the future and saw Kingdom Hearts and were like, nah, we can do better. I don't even want to call this a naming scheme. It's not a naming scheme. There's no consistency.
It does not make sense.
Like, Vampire Hunter 2? Where was Vampire Hunter 1?
Yeah, what's the difference of Vampire Hunter versus Vampire?
I don't know. I don't understand.
And then Vampire Savior.
I knew about this because Wooly Madden, a couple weeks ago when the Capcom Fighting Collection came out, he went on this whole tirade about how awful the Darkstalkers naming scheme for the franchise was, because none of them make sense. But as a franchise, unfortunately, as I have mentioned already, Darkstalkers is basically dead. Despite fan outcry, there are people that really want a new Darkstalkers game. I don't think it's as big a group as they'd like to think they are, but I'd like a new Darkstalkers game. I think that would be cool. I'd buy that and then play it for half an hour and then watch other people play it. But I'd buy it. But nevertheless, though, Darkstalkers characters are mainstays in various Capcom spin-off titles. Usually Morrigan. Felicia is second place in that. And then others, I guess. So in terms of the characters that appear in this game, Morrigan appears in all 4 Marvel vs. Capcom games. Famously in, I believe, 1 and 2, it's the exact same sprite as it is in this game, and that's a joke that a lot of people make. I don't know how accurate that is. I just know the Morrigan sprite is an FGC joke that is made quite often. But also, Felicia is in MVC 2 and 3, and as you mentioned earlier, Anakaris appears in MVC 2.
Yeah, because it's like, playing that game when I hardly know fighting games. It's like, who is this mummy guy? Would not have guessed he's from the same series. But yeah, okay. That's Anakaris.
Morrigan is the only Darkstalker in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, and the first 2 SNK vs. Capcom titles, but Felicia joins her in the 3rd SNK vs. Capcom game. And Morrigan has also appeared in a huge amount of other non-fighter crossovers like Project Cross Zone, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, and way more. We would be here all day if I listed every game that Morrigan shows up in. She's in a lot of games. She's in more games than her franchise contains, which is really funny. According to Capcom, at least back in 2013, while many people at the company would love to make a new Darkstalkers, there is nothing on the horizon at the current time. It is famously one of the biggest victims of the Capcom test, where there have been like 3 compilation releases of the Darkstalkers franchise since the last new game to come out, and they're always the same exact collection. Matt McMuscles actually has a really good video on the history of the franchise. I wanted to give it a watch and include some of that information in here, but I didn't have a chance, so definitely go check that out. It's a really good video. But they talk about how Capcom just kept releasing the same compilation, and then we're like, maybe if this does well, we'll make a new one. And then they didn't. And at one point, they even teased that a new one was coming, and then it didn't, because they released some PlayStation 3 compilation again, which was again the same compilation, and when even Darkstalkers fans were like, no, I'm not buying that again, give me a new game, that game didn't do well, and so any possible sequel to Darkstalkers was potentially shelved. From the sound of it, it is a very mismanaged franchise overall, and the only people whose fault it is that they're not making at least some money on Darkstalkers is Capcom's. I'm not going to pretend it would make, like, gangbusters, but they'd make some money. So, the composer we're going to talk about, his name is Takayuki Iwai, but he also goes by Anaki Takapon, or Anarchy Takapon, or Dokumaru, which is not the same as the last 2. So, Iwai worked extensively in Capcom's arcade division. I don't know anything about him from before he joined Capcom, just one of those situations, but he largely worked on the fighting game side. He is actually well known for pushing the boundaries of music in the fighting game genre. And he mainly did that because he wanted to try and expand it beyond just, this is the music that plays on the stage. This is the music that plays at the end of the match. There's the soundtrack. He is actually married to fellow former Capcom composer Yuki Iwai, though her maiden name is Satamura, who's known for her work on franchises like Gargoyle's Quest and Mega Man X.
Yeah, I feel like we brought her name up briefly in that episode for Mega Man X.
Likely. She sounded familiar, but when I looked at our episode tracker, we hadn't covered her specifically yet. But I would imagine she came up for Mega Man X.
But I don't know, just looking at, like, there's Takayuki and Yuki.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I feel like this is the second time that exact thing has happened, where it's the man's name is this and the woman's name is like one syllable taken off. He actually stepped away from composition in 1998 after a disappointing experience during his work on Street Fighter Alpha 3. See, for that game, he wanted to compose a soundtrack full of hard rock inspired by Guilty Gear.
Oh, interesting.
But budget constraints for the entire project killed those plans, and he ended up having to step away from that, and apparently that was just so disappointing to him that he was like, I'm done. After stepping away from composing, he primarily worked as a guitarist, but then fully left Capcom in 2000 alongside his wife to found the sound unit Wavelink Zeal. But then this unit dissolved in 2007 when he joined the development studio Crafts and Meister. But the couple have since formed a new unit called Zeal Star Dokmal. Doqmal. Yeah. And that's where he currently is today, as far as I can tell. In terms of his discography, like I said, he worked on a lot of Capcom fighting games, but it seems like his first big project at Capcom was Dungeons & Dragons Tower of Doom. And then from there, he rolled pretty much straight into Darkstalkers, the Night Warriors. Then he would do the soundtracks for Armored Warriors, X-Men Children of the Atom, Night Warriors Darkstalkers Revenge, Marvel Superheroes, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, Red Earth, Darkstalkers 3, which was not even listed on the games that Wikipedia told me existed. So there's another one. Vampire Savior 2, Vampire Hunter 2, Star Gladiator, Street Fighter Alpha 3, Tech Romancer, Project Justice, R-Type Final, Musashi Samurai Legend, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo HD Remix, and his last game, which I believe came out in like 2021, is R-Type Final 2. So he is still working in the industry, just not really as a composer. And in terms of development research for the soundtrack itself of this game, it also features work by Hideki Okugawa, who we talked about back in episode 143 for his work on Dead Rising.
Oh, yeah.
I should note something I didn't know before this. Every character has their own victory theme in this game on the victory screen, which I think is a very neat concept, especially at this early phase in the genre. Like, I don't think anything else at that time had that, which is really neat. Unfortunately, none of those are on the critical tracks because they're very, very, very short loops, and it didn't really fit. But let's get into those 5 critical tracks, the first of which is Player Select 1. As one might guess, this is at least one of the songs that can play on the character select screen. And I think of the 2 that I heard, at least, this one feels the most like the tone that I imagine Darkstalkers would be going for, which look at this screen full of monsters. It's not the longest loop in the world. It's longer than the victory themes. But I figured this sort of baseline of tone in terms of the music for Darkstalkers, I figured that was a really good way to start this Critical 5. This song was either composed by Takayuki Iwai or Hideki Okugawa, but kind of unclear in general of which one actually wrote the song.
Yeah, they put credits for each of the character themes, but not really too much else. So there's that. Doesn't make it easy. Does have a good bouncy little vibe underneath it all, but also really cool to have the kind of gothic-y almost organ synths come on through and then do these kind of chords and little progressions there, maybe just thirds there. It's nice and simple, but I feel like it gets the Creatures of the Night vibe across pretty well.
Yeah, I agree.
And you don't need too big of a, loop when you're doing a character select screen. I mean, I Want to Take You for a Ride is a pretty good indication of that. So
generally, you expect people to be off that screen within like 20 seconds. Because they know who they're gonna pick. Anyways, yeah, that does fit the Creature of the Night tone. Anyways, let's talk about a song that doesn't. Critical track number 2, the song that made me think I was having a stroke in the middle of a vacation rental home. This is Felicia Stage, USA.
Now, did you bring Herschel, your cat, to this vacation home?
I did not. He didn't deserve a vacation. He's done nothing to earn it. But this song is so weird. It's so weird. It was composed by Takayuki Iwai, and I will say that despite knowing of Felicia vaguely through like other crossovers that she shows up in, song where cat meows are an instrument is not something I expected. It is so weird. It is so weird. And yet, I love it.
Yeah, I did not have that on the bingo card. You're right, especially knowing Felicia, especially when the rest of the track is so 90s.
Yeah.
Like some of the drums and then it's the MIDI saxophone. Like, okay. But yeah, did not have meow as a possible choice of an instrument, huh?
I mean, I guess it makes sense. Felicia's a cat girl. I guess, sure, why not? This song, as you're going to hear, sounds literally nothing like any other song on this soundtrack.
It's definitely out there. And so are YouTube comments where, like, people are kind of lusting over Felicia.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I think there's a reason why she's the second most crossovered character in the series.
When people are like, well, you gotta admit, she looks good for a cat. And it's like, okay, stop it. Stop it.
We've gone too far. It's time. It's time to unplug the internet. We're done. At least lust over Morrigan. She's right there.
She is right there.
That's the point of the character. Anyways, we'll get to Morrigan in a second because critical track number 3 is Zabel Stage, Australia. The song was composed by Takayuki Iwai. It is the character theme for Lord Raptor, whom I mentioned earlier, is a rocker who has been brought back as a zombie. Probably my favorite design in the game. I'm glad that this is a very rock-heavy song. Part of me wishes it went harder, but I imagine the reason it doesn't is mainly because of like technical limitations and all that. But I feel like it would fit better if it went like even harder on the rock stuff.
I agree, and it's probably just the limitation of the sound card. Like, is this the CPS 2?
I think so. I believe so.
That sounds about right for the time, based on our conversations during the Street Fighter 2 episode and all that. So yeah, no, that sounds about what that was capable of. You're right. I think if it ever got remastered, it would go harder. But yeah, at the same time, for the instrument, like, yep, that sure is a rock guitar for the time. So captures that mood nicely.
Yeah. This is one of the main reasons why I'd like to see a new one, because I want to see what they do with this theme with, the ability to use real instruments.
Or people covering it, like outside of it just being a niche franchise.
I'm kind of surprised I didn't find very many covers of this song, I'll be real. Following that, we have to talk about her. This is critical track number 4, Morrigan Stage, Scotland. This was composed by Takayuki Iwai. It is, of course, the character theme for Morrigan. Again, the most famous character to come out of this franchise. She is more famous than the franchise she came from. I don't know if this really fits what I think of as Morrigan and her personality and all that, but I believe this is the theme that's been used for Morrigan since. I want to say this is what Marvel vs. Capcom 3 at least rearranges.
Yes, definitely borrows this melody.
But for me, this is not the theme I think of when I think of Morrigan, because the first game I played with Morrigan and it was Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, so Ainsland Castle, the stage music from that game, is the one that I picture, which is not this. But this is, it's a pretty good song, and it does sort of fit at least the dark tone a bit. I don't know how it could play more into the fact that Morrigan is a succubus. I don't know how musically you could do that, but I think overall this is a pretty okay fit for the character as I know her.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like I've come to know it as, oh, it's the Morrigan theme because that's what the Morrigan theme is and everything else. But then thinking back to this arrangement and does it fit the character and the Creatures of the Night tone? I don't know what it necessarily does, but I've just become so accustomed to that's Morrigan theme. And for better or for worse, it's a good theme. It's one I associate with her and oh yeah, that's what it is. But you're right. Does it match the melody you want to pair with a succubus? I'm not sure it does.
Well, let's just count our blessings that they did not decide to go in the same direction as Felicia's theme with something other than a cat for Morrigan's theme, because then we wouldn't be allowed to talk about it on this show. Anyways, critical track number 5 is Pyron Stage, Hellstorm. This one was composed by Hideki Okugawa. This is the boss stage theme. Pyron is the final boss of Darkstalkers, so it fit to make sure he was on this Critical 5. I don't think this is one of my favorite tracks on the soundtrack. It is good, and it's got this good energy to it, but I don't know, Lord Raptor's theme is better. Felicia's, while weird, is better. But it's still, it's a pretty good song, and especially a pretty fitting song for the final boss.
Totally agree. Lord Raptor's and Felicia's are the best fitting. I like how this sounds. I feel like it does have some stakes to it. But when you're talking about Hellstorm, could have gone a little harder. I don't know. I do like the key of it, and I like what it's doing at the beginning of the piece. But yeah, it can pass as a final boss, but when you're talking about demons and again these night warriors, maybe we go turn it up a little bit more into the harder, darker side of things.
Yeah, When I picture something called Hellstorm, more metal is what comes to mind. I think Doom has poisoned me on that.
Right, yeah.
4 tracks on the cutting room floor. The first one I have is Bishamon Stage, Japan. This was composed by Takayuki Iwai. I don't know, I have a soft spot for fighting game themes that are like traditional Japanese instruments. Like we talked about in the Live Alive episode, old, like, sound chips were, really good at traditional Japanese instruments. Again, almost as if they were developed in Japan. And I feel the need to give those a shout out whenever I hear them.
For sure, yeah. It is amazing how, like, that's almost like the instruments you feel like they tested on. Like, it's got to try to replicate that as well as it possibly can. And then we go forth and try other instruments. But, yeah, wow, it sure does a good job. For sure. Well done, CPS2.
And the second track on the cutting room floor, this is Gallon Stage, England. Gallon is such a worse name for John Talbane.
I know.
For whom this is the character theme for. What is that? Like, gallon of what? This song was composed by Hideki Okugawa, and this is not what I expected when I saw the design of John Talbane, the werewolf man.
Oh, yeah, no.
Like, jazz is not really the genre that I expected to hear. I mean, I guess that fits what fighting games think England is for some reason.
Some weird reason.
I don't understand.
Listeners in England, you got jazz pubs, right? Jazz pubs?
Yeah. That's where jazz comes from. Definitely not America. But it's a good song. It's just really not the genre I would have expected for a werewolf, but I wonder, he's probably based on Werewolf of London, huh?
Probably.
I'm just realizing that.
Now that we think about it, he's called Gallon because of the gallon of blood that he spills when he tears into you. I don't know. I feel like, yeah, the piece on its own is great. And again, we start with the Japanese instruments, and then we try to pivot to jazz instruments, and they sound okay, but nowhere near authentic. I like the piece. I don't know if it fits for a werewolf.
Yeah, that's basically where I am. So what will I never forget about Darkstalkers, the Night Warriors? What is the naming scheme of this? Just pick one. Pick one title. Is it Vampire, or is it Darkstalkers? Or is it Vampire Hunter? Or is it Vampire Savior? Pick one. You get one.
Well, if it were Vampire Savior, the Christian groups here in the West would have had a problem. And if it were Vampire Hunter, that may have worked, I guess.
But I'm pretty sure Vampire Savior came out here.
Oh, weird.
And it was called that.
You know what? Then I don't know. Vampire is a really cool name for a franchise in Japan. It's neat that you could lock down that word at that time, but it's just a shame what's come of it. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever get to play it. I'll just play Morrigan and other things. Thank you. I do like playing as Morrigan in those other Capcom games like MVC3 and Tatsunoko, and I do enjoy that. But yeah, I don't see myself getting back to the classic.
And I don't know. I think the character designs in Darkstalkers, across the board, are great. Even not including the characters in this game that cross over into stuff. I mean, MVC3 has Shenko, and her design is great. And then, MVC Infinite has Jeddah, who is also pretty cool looking, and his like skill set is really cool. It's a shame he's in that game. But yeah, like Darkstalkers has these really, really cool character designs, and 99% of them we are never going to see in a video game again, and that's kind of a bummer.
I forgot about Shenko. That was a neat inclusion in MBC3. I'm looking at Jeddah for the first time here, and that's also neat, but I've never seen this character before, ever.
He is important in the Infinite story mode. That's the only reason I know who he is.
Well, are you all fighting gamed out at this point? We've talked about Guilty Gear and Darkstalkers. I mean, I don't know how much more obscure you want us to go.
I hope you're not fighting gamed out, though, because there's a whole weekend of fighting games that you should watch.
Absolutely. Go load up on EVO 2022. And I'm excited to see some of those. I'm excited to also show my fiance some of those. Like, that should be really neat, actually. We've seen like GDQs and things like that, but do we broach watching EVO? We'll have to find out. That will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakeasy. Joe is over at StringPixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's also that MP3 podcast version that you want, and that's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Smasherpieces, is hosted. And you can find Smasherpieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we not only have a feed of podcast episodes, we also have a Spotify playlist where if we talk about a video game track on this show and it's on Spotify, it's getting added to this big monster playlist. Joe, anything added this week?
Guilty Gear is mostly already on there because of the Best of 2021, but the 2 tracks on the cutting room floor will be added. Darkstalkers is, unsurprisingly, not on Spotify, so nothing there. But a couple new tracks from Guilty Gear. There's at least something.
Capcom usually really good about getting their music, but when it's from that kind of a franchise, I guess that's not too surprising.
Yeah, to them, Darkstalkers might as well not. Like, Morrigan is just a character from generic fighting games that they put into stuff.
Don't think about it. When you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. Leave some feedback for us. How are we doing with these episodes? Also, suggestions for games to cover in the future as we round out 2022. Oh my gosh, we're getting so close. We're only like 2 months away from Spooks Month.
Finally. Soon it will be my time once more.
It would have been another perfect time for Darkstalkers to appear, but nope. It's Evo, baby. All right, Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I'll be talking about James Silva.
And I will be talking about Jaden Smith. It might be that Jaden Smith. I'm not positive it's that Jaden Smith, but we'll find out if it's that Jaden Smith.
We'll learn together.
All right, Joe, let's play us out.
I couldn't find any remixes of music from this soundtrack, which doesn't super surprise me, but is also kind of a bummer, because I was hoping to find something of Lord Raptors, but you know what I did find? Somebody did an arcade OST remix of the Felicia theme. It's a channel called CVG Remixes. Of course, it keeps the meows intact. It's very important. It's a very important central part of the song. And somehow it sounds even weirder with higher quality instruments. I'll let you decide if you agree with me.
Meow. That will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.